The Empathic Echo. By Thomas King. Chapter 11, Gathering Storm. The pronouncements of the oracle, once a distant echo, now resonated with the weight of an undeniable truth. Zen stood at a precipice, the swirling mists of uncertainty obscuring the path ahead. The sanctuary's stillness, a stark contrast to the tempest within, offered no solace. He carried the truth of his lineage, the legacy of the Chrono-Guardians, a burden that felt more like a shroud of responsibility than a mantle of destiny. The knowledge, once fragmented whispers, now roared, threatening to drown him. The fear, a palpable entity, clawed at his heart. He saw his reflection in the eyes of Ethelgard's populace, savior, monster, pawn. Each gaze was a judgment, each whisper an accusation. His parents had walked this path, their power a struggle, their sacrifice a shield. Was he destined to repeat their tragic narrative? To become a cautionary tale? The Shadow Syndicate, their tendrils still reaching, craved temporal dominion, and he, a Chrono-Guardian, however nascent, was both an obstacle and a prize. To confront them, to engage in the cosmic struggle for time's integrity, felt like a leap into the abyss. Yet, the alternative gnawed at him. To deny his destiny was to deny himself, to leave Ethelgard vulnerable, to allow the Syndicate unopposed. Elara's words were a steady anchor. You cannot outrun what you are. To deny it is to deny a part of yourself, a part that is vital to Ethelgard, and indeed, to the very fabric of time. His parents had not hidden, they had acted. Their sacrifice would be in vain if he chose fear over courage. The oracle's words echoed anew. You are the heir to their legacy, a legacy of guardianship, of balance, of profound respect for the temporal currents. Guardianship. Balance. Respect. These were not the words of a destroyer, but of a protector. The immediate challenge was not cosmic, but earthly, Ethelgard's fractured state. Lord Valerius's faction, cloaked in prudence, sowed seeds of doubt, painting Zan as unpredictable, a harbinger of chaos, a threat to be controlled, dissected. Their narrative preyed on historical trauma, highlighting his volatile power, suggesting his very presence was a temporal anomaly. Lady Eris and her allies countered, emphasizing the Syndicate's threat, portraying Zan as their weapon, their hope. Heroic images circulated, a counter-narrative against the fear. This battle of narratives had made Zan the unwilling focal point, a specimen dissected and interpreted. It's like they're fighting over a phantom, Zan mused, walking through the bustling marketplace with Elara. They argue about what I am, without truly knowing me. Their fears are real, Elara replied, her hand on his arm. But you cannot let their interpretations define your path. You know the truth. You know the stakes. He did. He knew the Syndicate's goal was temporal subjugation, the rewriting of history, the eradication of free will. His parents had understood this, had died preventing it. The oracle had confirmed it. The choice was not between fear and courage, but between allowing the past to dictate the future or actively shaping it. It was between succumbing to chaos or becoming a guardian of order. The path of the Chrono-Guardian was one of sacrifice, vigilance, and burden-bearing. His parents had chosen, and paid the price. Now it was his turn. I can't retreat, Zan said, the words firm. Fear receded, replaced by determination. Hiding won't protect anyone. It won't stop the Syndicate. And it won't honor what my parents did. Elara's smile was gentle. I knew you would see it. It's a responsibility, he continued, a wry smile touching his lips. A burden, perhaps, but one I have to carry. He looked at the faces in the crowd, some curious, some wary. I have to embrace this. I have to become the Chrono-Guardian. Not for them, but because it is what I must do. The path ahead was still obscured, but the choice was made. The weight of his destiny transformed, from passive suffering to active purpose. He would have to learn to wield his power, find allies, confront chaos, and face the Syndicate. Perhaps, by embracing his role, he could become the catalyst for unity Ethelgard desperately needed. The kingdom of Ethelgard, once a beacon of temporal stability, now lay fractured, its people divided by fear and suspicion. The aftermath of the time of chaos, a period of unprecedented temporal anomalies that had scarred the land and the collective memory, had left deep wounds. Whispers of Zan's lineage and his burgeoning power had ignited old fears, fanned by those who sought to exploit the kingdom's vulnerability. Lord Valerius, a cunning nobleman with an insatiable thirst for power, had skillfully woven a tapestry of doubt, painting Zan as an uncontrollable force, a potential harbinger of a new era of temporal devastation. His rhetoric preyed on the populace's deepest anxieties, reminding them of the cataclysmic events of the past, of the temporal rifts that had torn families apart and reshaped landscapes. He spoke of containment, of control, of ensuring that such power, so volatile and unpredictable, would never again threaten the delicate balance of their world. His carefully crafted speeches, delivered in hushed tones in the shadowed corners of taverns and the grand halls of noble estates, painted Zan as a living embodiment of the very chaos they had fought so hard to escape. Lady Eris, on the other hand, a pragmatist and a shrewd strategist, recognized the syndicate's insidious threat as far more immediate and existential. She understood that Zan, despite his raw power, was Ethelgard's greatest hope against a foe that sought not merely to conquer, but to rewrite the very fabric of time itself. Her faction worked tirelessly to counter Valerius's fear-mongering, discreetly disseminating information about the syndicate's true aims, their historical attempts to usurp temporal dominion, and the devastating consequences of their success. They highlighted the syndicate's clandestine operations, the unexplained disappearances, the subtle manipulations of events that hinted at a far greater, more sinister agenda at play. They portrayed Zan not as a threat, but as a shield, a unique weapon forged by destiny to defend against the darkness that sought to consume them all. Caught between these opposing narratives, Zan felt like a pawn in a game he was only beginning to understand. He knew the truth of his heritage, the responsibility bestowed upon him by the Chrono-Guardians. He felt the temporal currents humming beneath the surface of reality, a constant reminder of the delicate balance he was tasked with preserving. But convincing a kingdom steeped in fear and divided by ambition was a daunting task. He needed more than just his own conviction. He needed allies, individuals and communities who understood the stakes, who could see beyond the immediate anxieties and recognize the looming threat of the syndicate. With Alara by his side, her presence a steadying force, Zan began to seek out these unlikely allies. Their first destination was a place spoken of in hushed tones, a sanctuary of profound stillness and unwavering discipline, the Monastery of the Serene Mind. Nestled high in the desolate peaks of the Azure Mountains, far from the political machinations of the lowlands, this reclusive order of monks had dedicated their lives to the mastery of the self, particularly the control and purification of inner energies. They practiced rigorous mental disciplines, honing their ability to commune with their own spirits and, it was rumored, with the subtler currents of existence. Zan, whose own powers were inextricably linked to the flow of time and the very essence of reality, believed that learning from these ascetics could provide him with the inner fortitude and control necessary to wield his abilities without succumbing to their volatile nature. The journey to the monastery was arduous, a testament to the monk's desire for seclusion. The air grew thinner with each step, the paths treacherous, winding through jagged cliffs and windswept valleys. Yet the silence was profound, a welcome respite from the clamor of Ethelgard. When they finally arrived, the monastery stood not as a grand edifice, but as a series of austere stone buildings, seemingly carved from the mountainside itself. The monks, clad in simple saffron robes, moved with a quiet grace, their faces serene, their eyes reflecting a deep inner peace. They were met not with suspicion, but with a gentle curiosity by the abbot, a wizened man named Kalin, whose stillness seemed to radiate an aura of ancient wisdom. He had felt the ripple of Zan's arrival, a disturbance in the subtle energies that pervaded their mountain sanctuary. He understood that Zan was no ordinary traveler. After a period of quiet observation, Kalin granted them audience, his voice a low murmur that seemed to vibrate with the mountain's own ancient hum. "You seek something beyond the ordinary, young Chrono-Guardian," Kalin began, his gaze piercing yet compassionate. "You seek mastery over the storm within, a stillness amidst the temporal currents that rage around you." Zan explained his lineage, the oracle's pronouncements, the looming threat of the syndicate, and his own struggle to control the immense power that surged through him. He spoke of the fear that threatened to paralyze him, the internal conflict that mirrored the kingdom's divisions. He expressed his desire to learn the monks' techniques of emotional discipline, their methods of spirit communion, hoping to find a way to anchor himself, to achieve a clarity of purpose that would allow him to act decisively. Kalen listened intently, his brow furrowed not with disbelief, but with deep contemplation. "The path of the Chrono-Guardian is fraught with peril," he acknowledged. "Your power is a conduit to the very essence of existence, and such a connection demands profound inner harmony. The Syndicate seeks to bend time to its will, a perversion of its natural flow. To resist them, you must first master yourself. The temporal currents, like the rivers of our world, can be guided, but they cannot be dammed without consequence. Their flow is life, their disruption chaos." For weeks, Zan and Ilara remained at the monastery. The monks' training was relentless, demanding a level of mental and emotional discipline that pushed Zan to his limits. They practiced meditation techniques that allowed Zan to observe his emotions, his fear, his anger, his frustration, not as overwhelming forces, but as fleeting currents within the vast ocean of his consciousness. He learned to disassociate himself from these feelings, to acknowledge their presence without letting them dictate his actions. They engaged in exercises designed to heighten their sensory awareness, to perceive the subtle energies that permeated all things, including the faint echoes of temporal anomalies that still lingered in the surrounding peaks. Kalen taught Zan the art of soul listening, a deep form of meditation that allowed him to connect with the core of his being, to understand the true nature of his power not as an external force to be feared, but as an intrinsic part of himself, an extension of his will. He learned to channel his temporal energies not through brute force, but through subtle manipulation, like a weaver guiding threads of light. Ilara, too, benefited from the monk's teachings, her innate empathy deepening, allowing her to sense the emotional undercurrents of others with even greater precision. The monastery's tranquility began to seep into Zan's soul, calming the inner tempest, imbuing him with a quiet strength. Yet Zan knew that inner discipline alone would not suffice. The fractured kingdom of Ethelgard needed more than a disciplined guardian, it needed unity. He had to bridge the divides created by the time of chaos, to reach out to those who had suffered the most, to understand their fears and to forge a common front against the Syndicate. Their next journey took them to the ravaged lands of the Shadowfen, a region that had borne the brunt of the time of chaos. Once fertile plains, it was now a desolate expanse of twisted trees, shimmering temporal distortions, and lingering pockets of residual chaotic energy. The communities here were small, scattered, and deeply scarred. The survivors lived in constant fear, their lives dictated by the unpredictable whims of the temporal anomalies that still plagued their land. They had witnessed unspeakable horrors, lost loved ones to temporal displacements, and their trust in any form of authority, temporal or otherwise, had been shattered. Approaching these communities required extreme caution. The people of Shadowfen were wary of outsiders, their suspicion a shield forged in the fires of their suffering. Zan and Ilara moved not as knights or emissaries, but as humble travelers, offering what little aid they could, meager supplies, a helping hand with repairs, a listening ear. They did not immediately speak of the Syndicate or their own mission. Instead, they immersed themselves in the lives of the survivors, sharing their meager meals, listening to their tales of loss and resilience. They met with elders, individuals who had lived through the worst of the time of chaos, their faces etched with the grief of years. They spoke of loved ones lost to temporal currents, of families torn apart by sudden displacements, of the chilling feeling of encountering echoes of past selves or glimpses of futures that never came to pass. The raw emotion in their voices, the palpable fear that clung to them like the perpetual mist of the Shadowfen, resonated deeply with Zan. He saw in their suffering a reflection of the very chaos the Syndicate sought to unleash on a grander scale. One elder, a woman named Lyra whose eyes held the wisdom of 1,000 sorrows, spoke of a recurring temporal anomaly near their village, a shimmering vortex that sometimes showed glimpses of a peaceful past, only to abruptly shift to visions of a desolate, Syndicate-dominated future. "It whispers promises of what was," she told Zan, her voice raspy with emotion. "And then it shows us what will be if we do nothing. It plays on our deepest regrets and our darkest fears." Zan explained, as gently as he could, that these anomalies were not random occurrences but echoes of the temporal fabric, and that the Syndicate sought to exploit such disturbances for their own gain. He spoke of his own lineage, not as a claim to authority, but as a shared burden of responsibility. He revealed his growing understanding of temporal energies, and his conviction that Ethelgard, united, could resist the Syndicate's machinations. "The Syndicate feeds on division," Zan explained, his voice calm and steady, imbued with the discipline he had learned at the monastery. "They thrive on fear, on despair. But your resilience, the strength you have shown in enduring the time of chaos, is a powerful force. We can channel that strength, not against each other, but against the true enemy." He offered his assistance in understanding and, if possible, mitigating the temporal anomalies that plagued their land. He did not promise miracles, but he offered knowledge, a genuine desire to help, and a shared purpose. He spoke of the potential to create safe havens, to find ways to stabilize the temporal distortions, to protect the communities from further harm. Elara, with her empathetic touch, helped to soothe the villagers' fears, to foster a sense of trust. She showed them that Zan was not a force to be feared, but a protector, one who understood their suffering and was willing to stand with them. Her presence, her unwavering belief in Zan, became a beacon of hope for these despairing communities. The response was not immediate, nor was it unanimous. Decades of suffering had bred deep-seated mistrust. Some remained skeptical, clinging to their isolation, their fear too deeply ingrained. But a significant portion of the communities, moved by Zan's sincerity, Elara's compassion, and the very real threat that Zan articulated, began to listen. They saw in him not a lord or a noble, but a fellow traveler on a dangerous road, one who understood the scars of the past and was willing to fight for a future free from temporal manipulation. They began to share their knowledge of the local temporal anomalies, their survival strategies, their deep understanding of the land's unique challenges. They offered their own forms of resilience, their communal spirit, their hard-won wisdom. This was the forging of new alliances, not through grand pronouncements or political maneuvering, but through shared vulnerability, mutual respect, and a common enemy. Zan was learning that true strength lay not in solitary power, but in the collective will of those who understood the stakes. From the serene discipline of the monks to the enduring spirit of the Shadowfen survivors, he was gathering the pieces of a fractured kingdom, weaving them together with threads of hope and determination, preparing for the storm that he knew was gathering on the horizon. The Syndicate's shadow loomed, but in the heart of Ethelgard, a fragile unity was beginning to bloom. The weakened phoenix spirit, a faint ember of its former incandescent glory, pulsed within Zan's grasp, its ethereal warmth a stark contrast to the chilling premonition it conveyed. It was no longer a mere passive presence, a creature of instinct. It was a conduit, a voice reaching out from the liminal spaces between heartbeats and collapsing stars. In the hushed stillness of the sanctuary, where the air itself seemed to hold its breath, Zan felt the spirit's communication unfurl not as spoken words, but as a cascade of images and emotions directly imprinted upon his consciousness. He saw ancient temporal convergences, not as abstract historical events, but as vibrant, chaotic tapestries of interwoven timelines. These were moments when the fabric of reality had thinned, when the currents of time had swirled with an unprecedented intensity, capable of both creation and utter annihilation. The Phoenix showed him how, in ages long past, these convergences had been points of profound danger, places where reckless ambition could shatter the temporal order. Now, it impressed upon him, these ancient echoes were stirring once more. Then came the true warning, a chilling revelation that tightened Zan's chest with dread. The Phoenix shared a vision of the architect, the shadowy mastermind behind the Syndicate, a figure shrouded in an aura of cold, calculating malice. It showed him the architect not in his current machinations, but in his desperate, long-held ambition, to harness the raw power of temporal flux. The Phoenix revealed that the architect planned to exploit a rare celestial alignment, a cosmic ballet of planets and stars that occurred only once in millennia. This alignment, the spirit explained, would act as a celestial amplifier, a cosmic lens that would focus and magnify the architect's already potent corrupting magic to an unimaginable degree. This was not merely a plan for subjugation, it was a blueprint for temporal dominion, for the complete rewriting of existence itself. The visions shifted, becoming more urgent, more desperate. The Phoenix showed Zan what such an amplification would entail, not just a localized disruption, but a catastrophic unraveling of causality, a second time of chaos that would dwarf the devastation Ethelgard had already endured. Entire epochs could be erased, futures twisted into nightmarish realities, and the very concept of linear time rendered obsolete. The architect sought to become the sculptor of existence, molding reality according to his own twisted desires, eradicating free will and consigning all sentient life to a preordained, sterile existence. The sheer scale of the potential destruction was staggering, a wave of temporal entropy poised to crash down upon all that was. But amidst the dire prophecies, a glimmer of hope emerged. The Phoenix, its energy flickering like a dying flame, spoke of a hidden sanctuary, a place of immense power and profound stillness. It was not a place found on any map, nor marked by any monument. This sanctuary, the spirit conveyed, was a nexus of ancient temporal energies, a place where the very currents of time converged and could be harmoniously channeled and stabilized. It was a bastion, a forgotten repository of temporal equilibrium, capable of resisting even the most potent of corrupting influences. The Phoenix showed Zen how this sanctuary held the key to preventing a second time of chaos, not by brute force, but by restoring a measure of balance to the temporal flow. It was a place of refuge, but more importantly, it was a place of rectification, a point from which the damage could be mended. The spirit conveyed that this sanctuary was not merely a location, but a living entity, intrinsically linked to the well-being of time itself. Its existence was tied to the balance of the temporal currents, and its power could be tapped to create a bulwark against the architect's ambitions. However, the Phoenix's weakened state meant it could only offer fragmented glimpses, whispered warnings. It needed Zan, the Chrono Guardian, to undertake the quest, to seek out this sanctuary and to understand its purpose. The urgency was palpable. The celestial alignment was drawing nearer with each passing moment, its gravitational pull subtly distorting the temporal currents even now, a silent herald of the coming storm. The spirit's message was clear: Zan had to find this sanctuary, and he had to find it soon. The fate of Ethelgard, and perhaps all of reality, rested on his ability to decipher the Phoenix's veiled guidance and undertake this perilous journey. The telepathic communion, though taxing for the weakened spirit, left Zan with a profound sense of purpose, tempered by the daunting weight of his new responsibility. The fight against the Syndicate had just escalated, and the battlefield was now not just the present, but the very essence of time itself. The tremor that rippled through Zan's being had been more than a mere psychic echo. It was the dying gasp of a guardian spirit, a final, desperate plea against the tide of impending doom. The visions it had imprinted upon his mind were seared into his soul. The architect, a void of ambition personified, not merely seeking power, but aiming to unravel the very tapestry of existence. The celestial alignment, a cosmic inevitability, was a hammer poised to shatter the fragile glass of time, ushering in a new time of chaos more devastating than the last. But within that terror, the Phoenix had offered a single, flickering beacon, a hidden sanctuary, a nexus of temporal energies, a bastion against the architect's grand, terrifying design. Zen now understood. The whispers of the Phoenix were not just a warning, they were a map, albeit one drawn in starlight and shadow. He was no longer just fighting a clandestine organization. He was standing against a force that sought to rewrite the fundamental laws of reality. His path was clear, though fraught with peril. He had to find this sanctuary of temporal equilibrium, and unlock its secrets before the architect could twist its power to his own malevolent ends. The architect, a master of shadow and manipulation, did not tolerate defeat. The sting of Zan's interference, the frustration of his carefully laid plans being so abruptly disrupted, festered within him like a poisoned wound. His defeat at the hands of this nascent Chrono Guardian was an affront, a challenge to his absolute authority that could not be left unanswered. His rage was a cold, calculating thing, not a fiery outburst, but a methodical unraveling of his opponent's support. He retreated into the deeper recesses of his vast network, the tendrils of his influence extending like a dark web across Ethelgard. He knew that brute force, at this juncture, would be crude and inefficient. Instead, he chose his weapons with surgical precision: whispers, rumors, and carefully crafted lies. His immediate objective was to tarnish Zan's reputation, to transform the nascent hero into a symbol of fear and instability. The Phoenix's intervention, while ultimately a boon to Zan, had also been a display of raw, untamed temporal energy. The architect seized upon this, twisting the spectacular display into a narrative of uncontrollable power. He disseminated carefully worded reports through his informants, agents embedded within the royal court, the merchant guilds, and even the common taverns. These reports spoke of a rogue element, a power-hungry individual dabbling in forces that threatened the very fabric of their world. Zan, they insinuated, was not a protector, but a destabilizer, a nascent threat whose burgeoning abilities were already causing unpredictable ripples across the land. The visions of temporal distortions, the unsettling shifts in atmospheric pressure that had accompanied Zan's recent exertions, were no longer seen as signs of the architect's machinations, but as direct consequences of Zan's uncontrolled power. He was painted as a reckless force, a child playing with cosmic fire, and Ethelgard, already weary from past conflicts, was urged to view him with suspicion. Elara, too, became a target. Her close association with Zan, her unwavering belief in his cause, was spun into a tale of betrayal. The Whispers painted her as a duplicitous figure, a noblewoman seduced by the allure of forbidden power, now consorting with a dangerous entity. Her loyalty to the crown, her dedication to Ethelgard, was cast into doubt. She was depicted as a traitor, a pawn in Zan's larger game, her actions serving only to further his disruptive agenda. The architect's agents, skilled in the art of subtle manipulation, ensured that these narratives found fertile ground in the minds of those already predisposed to fear the unknown, those who clung to the comfort of the established order and recoiled from any hint of change. Beyond the realm of public opinion, the architect set in motion a series of calculated disruptions. These were not the grand, cataclysmic events that mark true temporal chaos, but smaller, more insidious disturbances. A sudden, localized blight withered crops in a prosperous agricultural region, plunging it into economic hardship. A series of unusual storms, seemingly random yet devastating, struck coastal towns, crippling their trade routes. A sudden surge of erratic magical energy caused the renowned academy's protective wards to flicker and fail, leading to minor, yet unsettling, magical anomalies within its walls. Each incident, in isolation, could be attributed to natural causes or unfortunate circumstance. However, when viewed through the lens of the architect's carefully planted rumors, they coalesced into a damning indictment of Zan. The timing was impeccable. These minor chaotic events, like a rash of pox across Ethelgard's skin, began to manifest shortly after Zan's more significant temporal interventions. The architect ensured that the timing was never coincidental, but always eerily aligned. News of the blighted crops, the tempestuous storms, and the malfunctioning wards spread like wildfire, amplified by the very network the architect had established to spread disinformation. The common folk, already on edge, began to connect the dots, however falsely. They saw Zan's dangerous power as the direct cause, the source of their growing misfortunes. Fear, a powerful and primal emotion, began to erode any nascent hope or admiration Zan might have garnered. The architect's machinations were a symphony of calculated chaos, designed to sow discord and solidify his own position. By blaming Zan for these misfortunes, he not only deflected suspicion from himself but also created a compelling reason for the populace to demand stronger leadership, a leadership that would crack down on such unpredictable threats. He fostered an atmosphere of paranoia, where every unexplained event became a potential symptom of Zan's uncontrolled abilities. This, in turn, bolstered the ranks of those who advocated for a more authoritarian approach, those who believed that stability could only be achieved through absolute control. They saw Zan as the embodiment of everything that threatened their peace, a dangerous variable that needed to be neutralized. In the royal court, the architect's whispers were more subtle, yet far more potent. His agents, cloaked in the guise of loyal advisors, played on the king's anxieties, his fear of losing control of his kingdom. They presented Zan not as a hero, but as an ambitious usurper, an unpredictable force that, if left unchecked, could usurp the throne itself. Elara's association with him was framed as a sign of her misplaced trust, a dangerous dalliance that could compromise her judgment and endanger the crown. They spoke of ancient prophecies, of temporal anomalies foreshadowing the rise of false prophets and destabilizing forces, weaving a tapestry of dread that ensnared the king's already faltering resolve. The queen, a woman of sharp intellect and a deep-seated pragmatism, found herself increasingly isolated as the king succumbed to the architect's insidious influence. Even the most loyal knights and council members found their loyalty tested, their faith in Zan shaken by the relentless barrage of carefully orchestrated accusations and the unsettling reality of the minor misfortunes plaguing the kingdom. The architect understood the delicate balance of power in Ethelgard. He knew that direct confrontation with the crown would be premature. Instead, he aimed to erode Zan's support from within, to isolate him and strip him of his allies. By creating a climate of fear and uncertainty, he ensured that when he finally made his move, the kingdom would be too fractured and too afraid to resist effectively. He was not merely fighting Zan. He was fighting the very idea of hope, of uncontrolled potential, of a future that deviated from his meticulously planned design. His countermoves were not just tactical, they were philosophical. He sought to crush the spirit of rebellion, to extinguish the flame of free will, and to replace it with the cold, sterile order of his own making. The architect's network was a marvel of clandestine organization. He had spent decades cultivating it, planting seeds of loyalty and influence in every corner of Ethelgard and beyond. His agents were not mere thugs or spies, they were weavers of deceit, artisans of manipulation. They understood the psychology of fear, the power of suggestion, and the human tendency to believe what they are told, especially when it confirms their existing biases. They whispered in the ears of merchants, feeding them tales of economic ruin directly attributable to Zan's meddling. They spoke to the farmers, showing them their blighted fields and telling them that this was the price of Zan's reckless power. They even reached the common soldier, planting seeds of doubt about their commanders, suggesting that their loyalty was being misplaced, and that true stability lay in a strong, centralized hand, a hand that the architect was subtly positioning himself to be. The orchestration was precise. A minor tremor, barely perceptible to most, would rattle a particular city known for its trade. Days later, news would emerge of a sudden, unexplained disruption in the flow of goods, a mysterious blockage that halted commerce. The architect's agents would then appear, offering solutions, explaining how such unpredictable events were the direct result of unchecked temporal energies, and how only a firm hand could restore order. Simultaneously, in a different region, a sudden, unseasonable frost would damage vital crops. Again, the narrative would be spun: Zan's power, a chaotic force, was bleeding into the natural world, destroying livelihoods. Elara, despite her efforts to maintain open communication with Zan, found her own efforts hampered. Letters were intercepted, messengers were waylaid, and rumors of her treasonous dealings with Zan circulated like a plague. She found herself increasingly isolated within the court, her once trusted confidants now regarding her with suspicion. The king, once her staunchest ally, had become distant, his eyes filled with a fear that was not his own, but one that had been carefully cultivated by the architect's machinations. She saw the truth of the situation, the deliberate campaign of disinformation, but her ability to counter it was severely limited. She was a voice crying in the wilderness, her warnings lost in the cacophony of fear and suspicion that the architect had so skillfully orchestrated. The architect's strategy was not to immediately confront Zan directly, but to systematically dismantle his support structure. He understood that a direct assault, while tempting, would likely galvanize opposition and unite those who feared his influence. Instead, he chose to weaken Zan's standing, to make him a pariah, and to create an environment where his eventual downfall would be seen not as a tragedy, but as a necessary act of preservation. He was a chess master, meticulously planning each move, sacrificing pawns and knights to achieve a decisive checkmate against the king. The effectiveness of the architect's countermoves lay in their subtlety and their insidious nature. He didn't create the fear, he amplified it, twisted it, and directed it. He exploited existing anxieties, preying on the inherent human desire for security and order. By painting Zan as the embodiment of chaos, he offered a clear, albeit false, enemy for the people to rally against. This served his ultimate purpose: to distract from his own machinations, to buy himself time, and to create a foundation of popular support for his eventual bid for absolute control. The storm was gathering, and the architect was ensuring that when it broke, Zan would be standing alone in the tempest, his allies scattered and his reputation in tatters. The architect's brilliance lay not in his power, but in his understanding of how to wield influence, how to shape perception, and how to turn the very fabric of society against those who dared to challenge him. The current strategy was a testament to his patience and his profound understanding of the levers of power. He was not merely reacting to Zan's actions, he was proactively shaping the narrative, forging the very perception of reality for the people of Ethelgard. The subtle corrosion of trust, the slow erosion of Zan's reputation, was a far more potent weapon than any blade or spell. He was building a foundation of popular fear, a fertile ground upon which his ultimate plan would be built. He knew that to control the future, he first had to control the present's perception of it, and that meant discrediting any force that threatened his meticulously crafted vision. The air within the temporal nexus crackled with an energy that was both ancient and raw. It hummed a silent song that resonated deep within Zan's bones, a symphony of moments stretched and compressed, of possibilities branching and converging. This was no longer the whispered sanctuary the Phoenix had described, but a crucible, a place where the very essence of time was laid bare, and where Zan was being forged anew. The monks, their faces serene and etched with the wisdom of ages, moved with a fluid grace, their presence a grounding force amidst the swirling temporal currents. Their teachings, once abstract pronouncements, were now manifesting as tangible exercises, each designed to push Zan's nascent chronomantic abilities to their absolute breaking point. Focus, Zan! Elder Maeve's voice, though soft, carried the weight of ages. It wasn't spoken aloud, but resonated directly within his mind, a telepathic caress that guided him. You are not merely observing time, you are learning to feel it, to become one with its ebb and flow. His current task was to perceive the immediate future. Not the grand sweep of destiny, but the fleeting seconds that preceded an event. He sat cross-legged on the polished obsidian floor, a small, intricately carved wooden bird resting on a pedestal before him. The objective, to catch the bird before it fell. Simple yet deceptively complex. He had to anticipate the precise moment it would be released, the angle of its descent, the subtle shift in air currents that would herald its movement. He closed his eyes, not to shut out the world, but to open his inner eye to the tapestry of temporal threads. He felt the faint vibrations of the monk's focused meditation, the almost imperceptible hum of the nexus itself, and then, a prickling sensation at the edge of his perception. It was a premonition, a ripple from a future that was not yet solid. He held his breath, concentrating all his will, all his nascent power, into that single point of awareness. He saw, in his mind's eye, the bird tipping, then falling. His hand shot out, a blur of motion, snatching the wooden carving from the air mere inches before it struck the pedestal. A collective exhale of approval, silent but potent, flowed from the monks. Good, Elder Kalen's mental voice echoed. But not yet perfect. You reacted. True mastery lies in prevention. The celestial alignment, a looming specter that cast a long shadow over Ethelgard, was drawing closer with every passing cycle of the moons. The Phoenix, its ethereal form shimmering at the edge of Zan's consciousness, provided a constant stream of telepathic counsel, a beacon in the storm of his training. Its guidance was not about brute force, but about finesse, about understanding the delicate interconnectedness of all moments. The architect seeks to shatter time. The Phoenix projected, its thoughts like the rustle of celestial feathers. We must learn to weave it, to mend its tears, to fortify its weak points. Your training now is not just for defense, but for reconstruction. The next stage of his training involved creating temporal barriers. This was a far more demanding endeavor. It required him to not only foresee an event but to actively manipulate the flow of time around it, creating pockets of stasis or temporal acceleration. The monks had constructed a series of energy pylons, humming with contained temporal force, around a designated training area. Zan's task was to create a shield of temporal distortion that could withstand a barrage of concentrated energy pulses fired from the pylons. The first attempts were chaotic. He'd strain, his brow furrowed in concentration, feeling the temporal threads begin to coalesce around him. But his control was fragile. A pulse would strike, and his nascent shield would ripple and dissipate like mist in a strong wind. The energy would slam into him, not with physical force, but with a jarring temporal displacement, leaving him disoriented, his senses reeling, a phantom echo of moments yet to come or long past flickering through his mind. Your emotional state is the anchor, Zan, Elder Maeve advised. Doubt, fear, anger, these are anchors that drag you down, that fray the threads you attempt to weave. Find your center. Find the calm eye of the temporal storm. He meditated for hours, seeking that inner stillness. He recalled the Phoenix's visions of the architect's relentless ambition, the cosmic horror of the time of chaos. The weight of responsibility was immense, a crushing burden. But within that burden, he also found a fierce resolve. He was the last hope, and he would not falter. He focused on the celestial alignment, on the ticking clock of impending doom. This urgency, paradoxically, became a source of strength. It wasn't fear that drove him, but a burning determination to protect the present, to safeguard the future. Feel the temporal momentum. The Phoenix's voice guided, a constant, soothing presence. Imagine it as a river. You can stand against the current, or you can learn to divert its flow, to build dams, to create eddies. He began to visualize the temporal threads not as fragile strings, but as strands of resilient, shimmering light. He learned to weave them, intertwining them, layering them, creating a complex latticework of temporal energy. He discovered that by focusing on the intent behind the energy pulse, its direction, its force, he could create a temporal countercurrent that would deflect it. Slowly, painstakingly, his barriers began to hold. The first time he successfully deflected a pulse, a surge of exhilaration coursed through him. The energy wash that usually buffeted him was now redirected, harmlessly dissipating into the nexus. He held the shield for a full 10 seconds, then 20. The monks nodded, their silent approval more precious than any praise. "You are learning to shape time, Zan," Elder Kalen affirmed. "Not merely to predict, but to influence. This is the true art of the Chrono Guardian." The training escalated. He was tasked with creating temporal loops, small, contained cycles of time that could replay a specific event. This required an even finer control, a precision that tested the limits of his concentration. He practiced on falling water droplets, making them rise and fall, in an endless, mesmerizing dance. He learned to manipulate the perception of time for himself, slowing his own movements to a glacial pace, allowing him to perceive details that would otherwise be lost in the blink of an eye. One exercise involved a series of rapidly falling sand grains. He had to isolate individual grains, freeze them in midair, and then gently guide them into a designated receptacle. Each grain was a fleeting moment, and he had to grasp it, hold it, and then release it precisely. His mind, stretched thin, felt like a taut bowstring. Headaches became a constant companion, a dull throb behind his eyes, a testament to the immense mental exertion. Fatigue gnawed at him, not just physical exhaustion, but a deep, soul-weary depletion. "The architect is also preparing," the Phoenix warned, its tone laced with a rare urgency. "His tendrils spread, his influence deepens. Every moment you spend here, honing your skills, is a moment he gains to further his agenda. You must be swift, but you must also be sure." The celestial alignment was a constant, looming presence, a celestial clock ticking down to an unknown, potentially catastrophic, event. The monks understood the urgency. They pushed Zan harder, their lessons becoming more intense, more demanding. They introduced him to the concept of temporal resonance, the idea that certain moments in time held a greater energetic charge, and that by understanding these resonances, he could amplify his abilities or even predict larger-scale temporal anomalies. He spent hours studying ancient temporal charts, complex diagrams that mapped out significant celestial events and their purported impact on the flow of time. He learned to feel the subtle pull of these resonant moments, like a tide tugging at the shore. The Phoenix's telepathic counsel often supplemented these studies, offering insights into the architect's own understanding of these temporal hotspots. "He seeks to exploit these nodes of power," the Phoenix explained, "to use them as amplifiers for his destructive intent. Your task is to understand them, to neutralize them, or, if necessary, to harness them yourself." The training reached its apex with the exercise of foresight weaving. This involved not just predicting immediate futures, but weaving multiple probable timelines into a cohesive vision, allowing him to anticipate several steps ahead. He would sit in a trance-like state, the nexus humming around him, and mentally project himself forward, exploring the branching paths of possibility. It was disorienting, like navigating a labyrinth where the walls constantly shifted. He saw fleeting glimpses of battles, of betrayals, of moments of unexpected triumph. "Remember, Zan," Elder Maeve's voice was a steadying presence in the temporal storm. These are not fixed destinies, but potentials. Your actions, your choices, will sculpt the final outcome. You are not a passive observer of fate, but an active shaper of reality. He learned to identify the strongest threads of probability, the paths most likely to be taken. He practiced reinforcing positive outcomes, subtly nudging events towards a more favorable conclusion. He also learned to recognize the architect's influence, the dark tendrils of manipulation that sought to steer events towards chaos. He saw how the architect's whispers in the court, the orchestrated misfortunes plaguing Ethelgard, were all part of a larger, insidious plan. The physical toll was immense. Zan's body ached with a weariness that seeped into his very soul. Sleep offered little respite, often filled with fragmented visions and the echoes of temporal distortions. His mind felt raw, exposed, yet paradoxically sharper than ever before. He was becoming attuned to the subtle rhythms of time, his senses expanding to perceive a reality beyond the mundane. The Phoenix, sensing his progress and the escalating threat, intensified its guidance. The architect prepares his grand symphony of chaos. You must be ready to conduct your own counter-melody, a harmony of preservation. Your training here is not merely about mastering temporal manipulation, but about mastering yourself. Your focus, your resolve, your very essence, these are the tools you will wield as much as any temporal power. Zan understood. The temporal nexus was not just a training ground, it was a forge. He was being tempered, refined, reshaped into the chrono-guardian Ethelgard desperately needed. The celestial alignment was a ticking clock, and with every passing moment, he was becoming a more potent force, ready to confront the architect and the encroaching storm. He felt the temporal currents within him surge, a nascent power waiting to be unleashed, a promise of stability in a world teetering on the brink of temporal oblivion. The whispers of the Phoenix, once a desperate plea, were now a chorus of encouragement, a testament to his burgeoning strength, a herald of the temporal battle to come. The training was grueling, relentless, pushing him beyond any perceived limit, but within that crucible, Zan was finding not just power, but purpose. He was becoming the guardian time itself needed. The hum of the temporal nexus had become a second heartbeat to Zan, a constant thrum beneath the surface of his awareness. The monks, their movements economical and precise, continued their silent ministrations, guiding his final days of intense chronomantic refinement. Yet, even within this sanctuary of measured time, a gnawing urgency had begun to bloom. The Phoenix, its ethereal form a constant, shimmering presence at the edge of his vision, spoke not of exercises or theory, but of impending doom. The celestial bodies conspire, Zan. The Phoenix's voice, a blend of ancient wisdom and celestial song, resonated directly within his mind. The alignment is no longer a distant prophecy, but a shadow lengthening across the very fabric of existence. Mere days now remain. The architect has set his endgame in motion, and Ethelgard stands at the precipice. Zan felt the truth of its words deep within his soul. His training, designed to bend and mend the currents of time, was nearing its conclusion, but not by his design. The Nexus offered a controlled environment, a place to forge his abilities. But the true test, the ultimate confrontation, lay beyond its temporal shields. He understood, with a chilling certainty, what the alignment signified. It was not merely a celestial spectacle, it was a cosmic conduit, a moment of immense power that the architect intended to exploit. He would use this confluence of celestial energies to twist and corrupt the world's arcane foundations, ushering in an era of shadow from which Ethelgard might never recover. He seeks to poison the wellspring of magic itself. The Phoenix continued, its tone laced with a profound sorrow. To unravel the delicate balance that has sustained your world for millennia. The alignment will amplify his dark intent, seeding the land with a corruption that will fester and spread, leaving behind only desolation and despair. This is his final gambit, his ultimate perversion of the natural order. The monks, though they spoke little, understood the gravity of the situation. Their serene expressions now held a flicker of concern, their eyes, pools of ancient knowledge, reflecting the encroaching darkness. Elder Maeve approached Zan, her presence a calming balm in the face of his rising anxiety. Your mastery of temporal manipulation grows, Zan, she said, her voice a gentle melody. You have learned to weave, to mend, to shield. But now you must become the sword. The sanctuary has served its purpose, preparing you for the inevitable. The time for seclusion is past. You must journey to the heart of the storm. The hidden sanctuary? Zan mused, recalling the cryptic term the Phoenix had used in its initial warnings. Where is it? How do I reach it? It is not a place easily found on any map, nor one marked by mortal hands. Elder Kalen interjected, his gaze steady. It lies in a pocket of temporal resonance, a place where time itself bends to protect its secrets. It is a sanctuary for those who understand the true nature of time, a refuge from those who would seek to dominate it. The architect knows of it, Zan, and he will seek to prevent you from reaching it. His forces will be positioned along your path, not to destroy you outright, but to delay, to deceive, to drain your strength before the final confrontation. The Phoenix projected images into Zan's mind, a winding path through an enchanted forest, shadowed by ancient trees that seemed to writhe with a life of their own, treacherous mountain passes, where the air grew thin and the wind howled with the voices of lost souls, and a labyrinth of forgotten ruins, filled with illusions and ancient guardians that tested not just strength, but wit and wisdom. The journey itself will be a trial, the Phoenix warned. The architect's influence permeates the land. He has sown seeds of discord, manipulated events, and corrupted those who stand in his way. You will encounter those who appear to be allies, only to discover their true allegiances lie with him. Trust will be a rare and precious commodity, Zan. Guard it closely. Zan felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He had spent weeks immersed in the abstract principles of chronomancy, honing his abilities in a controlled environment. Now, he was being thrust into a world where those skills would be put to the ultimate test, not against simulated threats, but against the tangible machinations of a cosmic entity. The celestial alignment, he realized, was not just a deadline for the architect's plan, but for his own. He had to reach the hidden sanctuary and prepare for the confrontation before the alignment reached its zenith. The journey will require more than just your newfound temporal powers, Elder Maeve added, sensing his apprehension. It will demand every ounce of your resolve, your courage, and your understanding of the temporal tapestry. You must learn to discern truth from illusion, to anticipate not just the immediate future, but the subtle currents of deception that the architect will weave around you. The monks presented him with a small, intricately carved amulet, made of a material that seemed to shimmer with captured moonlight. It pulsed with a faint, familiar energy. This is a temporal anchor, Elder Kalen explained. It will help you maintain your connection to your own timeline, to resist the disorienting effects of temporal distortions and the illusions the architect might employ. It will not shield you, but it will keep you grounded. Zen accepted the amulet, its cool surface a reassuring weight against his palm. He looked at the monks, their faces etched with a quiet hope, and felt a surge of gratitude. They had given him the tools, the knowledge, and now a chance. The path to the hidden sanctuary is not linear, the Phoenix instructed. It shifts and reforms, guided by the subtle currents of temporal energy. You must follow the echoes, the whispers of time itself. There are ley lines of temporal power that converge, creating ephemeral pathways. Seek these convergences. They will guide you. He spent the remaining hours in a final, intensive session with the monks, not on combat or raw power, but on the finer points of temporal perception and subtle manipulation. He practiced his ability to sense residual temporal echoes, the faint imprints left behind by significant events or powerful beings. He learned to read the subtle scars in the temporal fabric, indicators of the architect's recent passage or the presence of his agents. The architect thrives on chaos, Elder Maeve emphasized. He seeks to disrupt the natural flow, to create temporal paradoxes that unravel reality. Your goal is not to match his destructive force, but to restore balance. To mend what he seeks to break. To bring order to the temporal storm he is unleashing. As the final moments in the Nexus ticked away, Zen felt a profound sense of readiness, mingled with a healthy dose of trepidation. He was no longer merely a student of time, he was becoming its reluctant guardian. The celestial alignment was a ticking clock, and his race against it had begun. The architects of Ethelgard's future, the monks and the Phoenix, had equipped him for the perilous journey. Now, It was up to him to navigate the treacherous currents of time and reach the sanctuary before the architect's dark symphony reached its crescendo. Stepping out of the temporal nexus was like emerging from a dream into a harsh, unforgiving reality. The air outside, though crisp and clean, felt heavy with an unseen tension, a palpable sense of anticipation. The sky, a vast canvas of fading twilight, was already beginning to reveal the first stars, their distant gleam a stark contrast to the looming cosmic event. Zan could feel it, a subtle thrumming in the very atmosphere, a resonance that mirrored the fading hum of the nexus, but far more ancient and potent. The celestial alignment was no longer an abstract concept, it was an encroaching presence, a cosmic tide about to break. The phoenix's form flickered beside him, a beacon of ethereal light against the deepening shadows. "The architect's reach extends even here, Zan," it warned, its voice a hushed whisper that brushed against his mind. "He has woven his influence into the very land. The path you must take will be fraught with deception. Every shadow may hide an enemy, every friendly face a mask." Zan clutched the temporal anchor amulet, its cool, smooth surface a grounding sensation against his palm. He could feel the subtle vibrations of the earth beneath his feet, the faint whisper of the wind carrying scents of pine and damp earth, but also something else, a discordant hum, like a poisoned note in a familiar melody. This was the architect's touch, the subtle corruption that was beginning to seep into the world. "Your first objective," the phoenix continued, projecting a map of shifting light into his mind, "is to reach the Whispering Woods. It lies to the north, nestled between the Serpent's Tooth peaks. Within its depths lies a temporal convergence, a nexus point where the ley lines of time are strongest. It is there that your journey truly begins, where you might find the ephemeral path to the hidden sanctuary." The journey to the Whispering Woods was not long in distance, but the weight of the approaching alignment seemed to stretch each mile into an eternity. The landscape, though familiar from his limited travels within Ethelgard, now felt alien, charged with a sense of foreboding. Zan found himself constantly scanning his surroundings, his newly honed chronomantic senses straining to detect any temporal anomalies, any ripple of deception. As he approached the foothills of the Serpent's Tooth Mountains, the air grew noticeably colder, and the wind began to carry a mournful howl. The trees, once vibrant and full of life, now stood gaunt and skeletal, their branches twisted into grotesque shapes, as if recoiling from some unseen horror. This was the edge of the Whispering Woods, and even from a distance, Zan could feel its oppressive aura. "The woods are not naturally malevolent," the phoenix explained, its light intensifying as if to push back the encroaching gloom. "But they are a place of deep temporal resonance. The architect has amplified the ancient energies here, twisting them to his will. The whispers you will hear are not just the wind, they are echoes of the past, fragments of lost time, and perhaps, the architect's own insidious suggestions." He entered the woods cautiously, the dense canopy immediately plunging him into a perpetual twilight. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the rustling of unseen creatures and the mournful sigh of the wind through the skeletal branches. The temporal anchor around his neck pulsed gently, a steady reminder of his connection to his own time. Almost immediately, he began to experience the whispers. They were insidious, fragmented thoughts that seemed to arise from within his own mind, yet felt utterly foreign. They spoke of doubt, of fear, of the futility of his quest. "Turn back, Zan. This is a fool's errand. The architect is too powerful. Your efforts are meaningless. The monks lied to you. This sanctuary does not exist. You are walking into a trap. Why fight? Accept the inevitable. Embrace the coming chaos. It is a release." Zan clenched his jaw, focusing on the phoenix's steady presence and the monk's teachings. He pushed the insidious whispers aside, reminding himself that these were illusions, temporal echoes amplified by the architect's influence. He concentrated on sensing the temporal ley lines, the ethereal currents that the phoenix had spoken of. He extended his senses, feeling for the subtle currents that flowed beneath the surface of reality. He saw them at first as faint, shimmering threads, visible only to his chronomantically attuned eyes. They seemed to originate from deep within the woods, weaving and converging in a complex, almost organic pattern. The phoenix guided him, pointing him towards the strongest concentrations of these energies. "The convergence is near," the phoenix communicated, its voice a low thrum of anticipation. "But the architect will not let you reach it unchallenged. He will try to mislead you, to sow discord amongst the temporal currents themselves." As if on cue, the whispers intensified, morphing into a cacophony of conflicting voices, each vying for his attention. The shimmering threads of the ley lines began to flicker and distort, their clear paths becoming muddled and confused. Zan felt a wave of dizziness wash over him. He stumbled, catching himself on the rough bark of a gnarled tree. He closed his eyes, forcing himself to find his center, to recall the lessons of calm focus and emotional control. He breathed deeply, visualizing the temporal threads as stable, unwavering streams. He opened his eyes, and though the whispers still assailed him, he could now perceive the true currents beneath the chaos. The architect was attempting to create a temporal maze, to trap him in a loop of confusion. He saw a distinct path, a brighter, more stable thread that seemed to lead deeper into the woods, diverging from the distorted paths that led to dead ends or looping back on themselves. This was the true ley line, the path to the convergence. "He has agents here," the phoenix warned, its ethereal form solidifying slightly, as if preparing for a confrontation. "Watch for those who move with unnatural speed, or who seem to be in places they should not be. Their temporal signatures will be warped." As he followed the true ley line, Zan encountered his first obstacle. Standing in his path was a figure cloaked in shadow, their form indistinct, their presence radiating a palpable aura of temporal distortion. They moved with a chilling, jerky fluidity, their limbs seeming to skip fractions of a second forward and backward in time. "A temporal anomaly," Zan murmured, recognizing the signature. "An agent of the architect." The figure raised a hand, and a blast of distorted temporal energy shot towards Zan. It wasn't a beam of raw power, but a wave of temporal displacement, designed to age him rapidly, to send him hurtling into a future he was not meant to reach. Zan reacted instinctively, weaving a temporal shield, a shimmering barrier of compressed time. The blast struck, and the shield buckled, but held. He felt the strain, the immense pressure of resisting the architect's chaotic energy. "You cannot defeat him with brute force, Zan," the phoenix urged. "Use his own weapon against him. Manipulate the temporal flow. Create a countercurrent." Remembering his training, Zan focused his will, not on simply blocking the energy, but on redirecting it. He visualized the chaotic temporal wave, identifying its core frequency, and then projected his own counter-frequency, a wave of stability and order. The blast wavered, then began to split, the two halves of the energy wave colliding with each other, creating a localized temporal paradox that consumed the anomaly's energy. The cloaked figure recoiled, its form flickering, before dissolving into a swirl of corrupted temporal energy. Zan pressed on, the encounter leaving him drained but resolute. The whispering would seem to press in on him, the whispers growing more frantic, the shadows deepening. He could feel the proximity of the temporal convergence, a powerful nexus of chronomantic energy that seemed to hum in resonance with his temporal anchor. He pushed through a thicket of ancient, moss-covered trees and found himself in a clearing bathed in an ethereal, silvery light. At the center of the clearing stood a massive, ancient tree, its branches reaching towards the sky like the skeletal fingers of a titan. Around its base, the air shimmered, distorting reality like heat rising from a desert road. This was the temporal convergence. "You have reached it, Zan." The phoenix's voice was filled with a rare commendation. "But the architect will not abandon his efforts to thwart you. This is a place of power, and he will try to corrupt it before you can harness it." As if on cue, the ground began to tremble. The silvery light of the clearing intensified, then began to flicker, tinged with an ominous crimson hue. The ancient tree at the center seemed to groan, its very essence struggling against an unseen force. From the shadows at the edge of the clearing, more figures emerged. These were not the shadowy anomalies of before, but warriors clad in dark, obsidian armor, their movements unnervingly synchronized. They carried weapons that pulsed with the dark, temporal energy. "The architect's lieutenants," the phoenix stated grimly. "They are here to prevent you from activating the pathway. You must reach the heart of the convergence, and secure the path to the hidden sanctuary before they can stop you." The warriors advanced, their formations unnervingly precise. Zan knew he couldn't fight them all head-on. He had to be strategic, to use the temporal convergence to his advantage. He focused his energy, feeling the raw power of the ley lines surging around him. He began to weave a temporal distortion field, not to attack, but to confuse, to misdirect. He created pockets of accelerated time, causing the warriors to overshoot their targets, to collide with each other. He generated brief moments of temporal stasis, freezing them in their tracks, allowing him to slip past. The temporal anchor pulsed fiercely, helping him maintain his own temporal integrity amidst the chaos. He reached the base of the ancient tree, its bark cool and strangely smooth beneath his touch. The crimson light pulsed erratically, a sign of the architect's influence attempting to seize control of the convergence. He could feel the faint, almost imperceptible echo of the hidden sanctuary, a whisper of stability amidst the encroaching chaos. "Focus, Zan!" the Phoenix urged. "The alignment is drawing closer. You must establish the connection. You must weave the path." He placed his hands on the ancient tree, channeling his chronomantic energy into it. He visualized the stable ley lines, the harmonious flow of time, and pushed back against the architect's corrupting influence. The crimson hue flickered, warring with the natural silvery light. The warriors, recovering from his temporal maneuvers, pressed their attack, their dark energy weapons lashing out at him. He felt a searing pain as one of the energy blasts grazed his arm, the wound aging rapidly, his flesh withering before his eyes. He grit his teeth, pushing through the pain, focusing all his will on the task at hand. He saw the connection, a faint, shimmering pathway forming in the air before him, leading into the distorted reality of the convergence. With a final surge of effort, he poured his energy into the pathway, reinforcing it, solidifying it. The silvery light of the convergence flared, pushing back the encroaching crimson. The warriors faltered, their attacks weakening as the architect's influence over the nexus began to recede. "Go, Zan! Now!" the Phoenix urged, its voice strained. "The path is open, but it will not remain so for long." Without hesitation, Zan stepped into the shimmering distortion. The world twisted and contorted around him, colors and sounds blending into a dizzying kaleidoscope. He felt a sensation of immense speed, of being pulled through a temporal tunnel, the echoes of countless moments rushing past him. Behind him, he heard the triumphant roars of the architect's warriors, and the fading, but still potent, hum of the corrupted convergence. When the disorientation finally subsided, he found himself standing on solid ground, the air around him still and quiet. The light was soft, diffused, and a profound sense of peace emanated from the very stone beneath his feet. He looked around, his eyes taking in the serene architecture of what could only be the hidden sanctuary. It was a place untouched by the ravages of time, a bastion of temporal stability. His journey had been fraught with peril, a race against the encroaching darkness, but he had succeeded. He had reached the sanctuary, and now, he was one step closer to confronting the architect and preventing the celestial alignment from plunging Ethelgard into an eternal night. The true battle, however, was yet to come.